If it weren't for your pension, we'd have no use for you. He said it just like that, over his shoulder, not even looking up from his phone. I stood at the stove, one hand on the wooden spoon, the other trembling slightly over the skillet. The rice had just finished steaming, the roast was resting on the counter, and the gravy still needed stirring. But my hands suddenly forgot how to move. Grant sat at the kitchen island, like he always did. Legs spread, beer, half-finished screen, lighting up his face like some smug little god. Tara was in the hallway, folding laundry she never washed, and chimed in with a soft snort. Not even a word, just that sound, dismissive, like I was a joke neither of them found funny anymore. I didn't say anything. I don't even remember breathing. I turned the stove off, slowly, carefully, set the spoon down on the porcelain spoon rest Tara had insisted was more modern. My legs moved, but it felt like I was watching someone else walk out of the kitchen, past the hallway mirror, past the closed door to the master bedroom I used to sleep in, into the little room at the back of the house they now called the utility space. I sat on the edge of my cot and stared at the wall. My photo with Walter, the one we took in front of this very house 37 years ago, hung above the outlet, crooked. I didn't fix it. I just stared. Then I stood up and opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, the one they never noticed. Inside was the original deed. My name, my signature. No one else's. Just mine. They didn't know that. I pulled out the folder, pressed it flat, and ran my hand over the seal like I was smoothing down something holy. The rice could wait. The roast could cool. I had waited long enough. It was supposed to be temporary. That's what I told myself the day Grant called voice cracking, saying Tara had lost her job, and they were 3 weeks behind on rent. Just until we catch up, Mom, he said. It won't be long. I didn't hesitate. I offered them the guest room, cooked a welcome dinner, even bought little toiletries to make them feel at home. That was 3 years ago. Somewhere between temporary and just until my house became theirs. It started small. They repainted the living room without asking. Said the old color felt depressing. Then the thermostat began to hover at temperatures I couldn't bear. Tara said the cold helped her migraines, so I started wearing 2 sweaters just to drink my morning coffee in peace. Except, even that was taken. One morning, I opened the cupboard, and my favorite mug, the ceramic one Walter gave me for our 20th anniversary, was gone. I asked Grant. He shrugged. Maybe it cracked. My dining chair disappeared next. They said they needed more space for Juana's booster seat, but Juana hasn't used one in a year. So now I stand while they eat. Or I take my plate to the laundry room and eat alone. They said nothing when they moved their bookshelves into the master bedroom. Said it was only for storage, but I noticed how the closet filled up next. My blouses pushed into a corner. My perfume replaced by Tara's labeled bins. And still, I pay the gas, the water, the electric. I haven't said no in years. Maybe that's what they count on. Maybe that's why Grant felt bold enough to say what he said tonight. The room they gave me, my space, used to be the sewing room. It still smells faintly of lavender oil and starch. But now it holds only a cot, a side table, and a tiny lamp with a flickering bulb. I lie awake in there most nights, staring at the ceiling, listening to their voices in the hall, hearing doors close that I no longer open. But I didn't forget whose name is still on the deed. Sophie slips into my room most nights when the house settles and the shadows stretch long across the hallway. She taps twice, soft and careful, like a secret. I keep a thermos of cocoa hidden under the bed, nothing fancy, just powdered mix and water. But to her, it's a tradition. She curls her legs under her and sips like she's in a cafe. And I pretend my cot is a booth and the flickering lamp is candlelight. Mom says you spoil me, she whispered last night, grinning. Tara says a lot of things, I murmured back. From the hallway, Tara's voice pierced the quiet. Sophie, it's late. Enough sugar. You'll rot your teeth. I winced, but Sophie didn't flinch. She reached for my hand instead, her fingers cool and sure. She doesn't like us being close. I didn't know how to answer that. What could I say that her mother resented me for the space I still occupied? That I was just biding my time like an unwanted houseplant? I don't care, Sophie said before I could lie. You're the only one who sees me. She'd left her sketchbook under my pillow the night before. I found it this morning while folding the blanket. On the page, a woman with wind-blown hair, a long cape, trailing behind her. Standing on the edge of a roof under a star-pocked sky. Below in shaky pencil, that's you. You just don't know it yet. I pressed the paper to my chest and sat with it for a long time. Sophie sees things too well for her age, how Tara glares when I refill the kettle. How Grant flinches when the bills come. How I shrink a little more each day. She sees it all, and somehow, she still sees a hero in me. This morning, Tara found the drawing while rummaging through the laundry. She didn't say a word, just scoffed and tossed it on the counter like garbage. I picked it up after she left and smoothed the fold marks. I taped it above the cot, right where I could see it when I woke up. The house was quiet again, but not in the peaceful way it used to be. It was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest like a blanket left on too long. Sophie had gone to bed after slipping me a peppermint and a smile. Grant and Tara were still awake somewhere in the house, their voices low but sharp through the thin walls. I waited until I heard the back door lock click. Grant's final round before bed. Then I reached under my cot, pulled out the key I'd taped to the slat, and unlocked the drawer at the bottom of my filing cabinet. The deed was still there. It was older than Tara's entire marriage, yellowing at the edges, but my name was bold and untouched. Marcella Quinn. No co-owner. No et al. Just me. Years ago, Grant asked about adding his name for security. I remember nodding, even letting him print a draft document he never noticed I never signed it. That unsigned copy was in the drawer too, along with a newer envelope sealed, marked with a date I had long tried to forget. Inside were legal forms I'd prepared with a lawyer back when I thought I might remarry. I never did. But the papers, still valid, confirmed everything I needed. The house, the land, and every inch of the property were mine alone. I spread them across the cot, smoothing out the corners with the side of my palm. I had forgotten how powerful paper could be, how something so still could carry so much weight. They think they own this house now. They think I'm just the pension and the pantry. But this house was mine before Tara knew Grant's middle name, before Sophie was born, before Walter died in the upstairs bedroom holding my hand, and I never gave it away. I slid everything back into the drawer except the deed. That I placed in a fresh folder. Then I turned off the lamp laid back on the cot and stared up at the sketch Sophie had drawn. I hadn't seen Eleanor Graves in nearly 8 years, but the moment she walked into the cafe, she was exactly the same, neatly pulled back silver hair pressed blazer, and that same sharp look in her eyes that once cut through courtroom nonsense like butter. We used to share a classroom wall back in the day, me with literature, her with civics and law. Now she was retired like me, but still had that crispness in the way she moved, like life hadn't worn her down the way it had me. She hugged me softly, then sat. You said you were bringing something. I reached into my tote and laid the folder on the table between us. Her fingers moved fast, practiced, flipping through each document like a librarian, scanning overdue books. When she reached the deed, she paused. You never transferred it? No, I said quietly. I never did. Her eyes met mine. Marcella, you still own it. Every nail, every brick. And you can prove it. I swallowed hard. I don't know what I expected her to say, but that sentence settled somewhere deep inside my chest. I let it go on too long, I whispered. They moved in like it was temporary, then took everything like it was owed. And I just watched it happen. Eleanor leaned back, arms crossed. You weren't watching. You were surviving. And now you're ready. I looked down at my coffee. I'm not here for sympathy. Good, she said. Because I'm not giving you any. What you need is a plan. And I think I can help you with that. We spent the next hour going over timelines, legal angles, and quiet next steps. She never once asked why I hadn't acted sooner. She just listened and prepared. By the time we stood to leave, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not rage, not even hope. Just readiness. When I got home, Tara barely looked up from the couch. Grant was fiddling with something in the garage. The house still smelled like their life, but soon it would smell like mine again. 3 days after the cafe meeting, the envelope arrived hand-delivered to the front door in the early afternoon. I was folding towels in the laundry room when I heard the knock, steady and professional. I didn't come to the door. I didn't need to. The man in the suit asked for Grant. I heard the front door shut, then nothing, until Grant's voice echoing sharp through the hallway. What the hell is this? I kept folding. By the time he came storming into the kitchen, Tara was already behind him, her voice high and panicked. Is this some kind of joke? A mistake? I stirred the soup unbothered. They stood there, both holding the letter, like it might catch fire in their hands. I didn't look up until I placed the ladle on the counter and turned down the burner. It's not a mistake, I said. And it's not a joke. Tara laughed once sharp and bitter. You're evicting us, I met her eyes, then Grant's. You have 30 days. Grant stepped forward like he might say something cruel, but Sophie appeared in the doorway, barefoot and quiet, holding her sketchbook to her chest. He stopped himself. I didn't stay for their questions. I ladled soup into a single bowl, set the table for one, and placed a napkin down, like it was a holiday. They stood there for a long time, watching me eat. No one said another word that night. I cleaned the kitchen as I always did, wiped the counters, locked the door. Then I went to my room and placed the folder back in the drawer. Everything was in motion now. I had been quiet for too long. Now the papers would speak for me. The next morning, the house didn't wake gently. Tara's voice cracked through the hallway like glass breaking. Doors slammed. Cabinet drawers yanked open. I heard her marching from room to room, muttering half-sentences and curses like the walls had betrayed her. Then came Grant. He didn't scream. Not at first. He walked into the kitchen slowly, shoulders tight, holding the notice like it still might dissolve if he stared at it long enough. You're serious, he said. You're actually doing this. I sat at the table, sipping coffee. Sophie was in the corner, drawing quietly on the floor. Her legs crossed her head down. I'm not kicking anyone out, I said calmly. I'm taking back what was never yours. Tara came in next, barefoot, hair wild. This is our home, she snapped. We built a life here. You moved into mine, I said, looking directly at her for the first time in weeks. Sophie looked up. She stood and walked to my side without saying anything, sliding her hand into mine. It was small, cold, and certain. I want to stay with Grandma, she said softly. That broke something in Tara. Oh, now you've turned her against us. Unbelievable. Grant stepped forward. We have nowhere else to go. You had 3 years, I replied. 30 more days should be plenty. He looked like he might cry. Or yell. Maybe both. But he didn't do either. He stood there, shoulders sagging under the weight of everything he'd never taken responsibility for. I thought we were family, he said, almost a whisper. I didn't respond. I simply reached for Sophie's drawing, still taped above the table of the woman with the cape on the roof. I ran my hand across the corner gently. Tara left the room in a flurry of angry footsteps. Grant stayed a few moments longer, then followed. Only Sophie and I remained. I refilled my coffee and handed her a warm cup of cocoa. She smiled and leaned her head against my shoulder. The house felt quieter than usual, but it wasn't empty. It was clearing. The sound of packing isn't quiet. It's angry zippers yanked open drawers, slammed boxes dragged across wood floors that Walter laid down by hand. Tara moved through the house like a storm in heels, blaming everything and everyone, me, the economy, the court system, bad luck. Grant said less. He moved slower, like each item he packed was another reminder of how far he'd drifted from the boy who once built birdhouses with his father in the backyard. He never looked me in the eye. Not once. I stayed out of their way. I didn't gloat. I didn't hover. I simply helped Sophie roll up her art supplies and pack her backpack with books and pajamas for the weekends ahead. She wasn't staying with me full-time, not yet. But the message was clear. She wanted roots here, not just visits. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she whispered as I tucked her sketchbook into the front pocket. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "None of this is yours to carry." Tara passed by the doorway without stopping. "Make sure she doesn't forget her charger." She snapped like I was a stranger babysitting on short notice. Sophie didn't flinch. She hugged me tighter instead. It took the better part of the day, but by sunset, the house felt lighter. The echoes of their footsteps grew fainter with every trip to the car. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching them through the window as they loaded the last box. No goodbye. No thank you. Just the muffled thud of the trunk closing and the sound of an engine starting. After they drove off, I walked back through the house slowly. The walls still held dents from picture frames. I never hung scuffs from shoes I didn't wear. But the silence felt different now, not imposed, but earned. Later, as I folded the last blanket on my own bed again, I noticed a small, sticky note on the corner of the mirror. Sophie's handwriting, careful and sure. "You did it. You're free." I pressed my fingers over the words and let myself breathe. The quiet came slowly, like a tide rolling in after a long storm. At first, I didn't trust it. I moved carefully through the house, waiting for a voice to bark from the hallway, a door to slam, footsteps to thunder overhead. But none came. It wasn't that I had left. It was that they had. And for the first time in years, I could hear the house breathe again. I walked barefoot across the living room floor, the one Walter and I had laid ourselves the summer before he got sick. I'd forgotten how warm the wood felt in the morning light. No more scatter rugs covering it up. No more shoes tossed in every corner. Just the floor and my feet and the sun. I moved back into the master bedroom that night. Not just with boxes, but with intention. I stripped the bedding, opened the windows, and let the air carry everything out. The walls still held shadows of frames Tara had hung without asking. I patched the holes and painted them. Soft taupe the next morning. I bought curtains. Not the stiff modern ones they'd insisted on, but cotton panels white with tiny stitched vines that reminded me of the garden Walter always wanted to build. The guest room became mine too, a reading space, a place for Sophie to stay when she visited. I lined the shelves with books I hadn't touched in years and planted basil and mint in the window box. The pension checks still came right on time, but now they paid for groceries, not their delivery apps. For books, not cable bundles I never watched. For garden soil and curtain rods and fresh jam from the Saturday market. I started writing again. Just little things. Notes. Thoughts. Letters I'd never send. One morning, I stood by the stove stirring oatmeal and realized the radio was playing. I hadn't turned it on in months. The music filled the kitchen like it belonged there. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just let it play as I made coffee and watched the sun hit the sink like it used to. Saturdays belong to Sophie now. She arrives just after breakfast, still in her sneakers, hair pulled back, eyes bright with questions. We bake things that never turn out perfect. Too much cinnamon, uneven crusts, a lopsided cake, once that we called abstract. She laughs easily, and I find myself laughing with her, not because something's funny, but because there's no longer anything weighing the room down. We read on the porch when the weather's good. I let her pick the book. Sometimes she reads aloud, her voice rising and falling like wind through trees. Other times we sit in silence, side by side, pages turning like a slow heartbeat. On Sundays, Eleanor brings fresh pastries and talks about the old courthouse days. We sit in the backyard, coffee cups, warm in our hands, sunlight stretching across the patio stones. She never asks about Grant or Tara. I never bring them up. We talk about herbs and books, and how Sophie reminds her of a young activist she once defended. I like those mornings more than I expected to. The house feels lived in again, not occupied, claimed. I planted lavender by the front walk. Sophie helped. We wore gloves too big for her hands and got dirt on our jeans anyway. She asked if we could plant a lemon tree, and I told her no. Oregon winters weren't kind to them. But we'll find something else. Sometimes I still open the drawer. The deed is there, right where I left it. I take it out now and then, not because I need to reassure myself, but because it reminds me who I am, who I always was, who I forgot to be. I hold it in my hands the way some people hold old photographs, not to revisit pain, but to remember that it didn't break you. I pour coffee every morning in the mug that reappeared after they left. I sit by the window, feet tucked under me, steam rising into a room finally quiet in the right ways. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for anything.